The warp drives of the alien fleet sparkled as they carved the void of space at sublight velocities, following a painstaking chase that left a trail of obliterated worlds. The aliens, conquerors of countless civilizations over millennia, ripped the fabric of space like a pack of wolves doggedly pursuing a fawn. They were stunned when that fawn, the humans, unexpectedly turned and bounded away at velocities inconceivable to the aliens, faster than light. The human starship Odyssey shot ahead, leaving the alien pursuers in their cosmic dust. Captain Jake Ryder's heart pounded as he glanced at his ship's sensors. He gulped hard. The experimental faster-than-light FTL drive worked, but it propelled the Odyssey far out of known space into uncharted territory teeming with unknown threats, all while a vast alien armada ominously shadowed them from light years behind. Time was a luxury the humans didn't have. They were the only ones fast enough to warn Earth of the coming onslaught that would enslave or exterminate humanity. But first, they had to find their way home through the star-studded abyss as the noose of alien oppression tightened around mankind's collective throat. The survival of the human race hinged on the actions of one ship, one crew, one captain, and the precarious light-speed technology that was their only lifeline. The Odyssey's sensors pinged an alert, dragging Jake out of his thoughts. He squinted at the readout, then double-checked the data. There was a ship out there, hanging dead in space. He opened a channel to engineering. "Sanchez, are you seeing this? What do you make of it?" "It's not Zorgax, that's for sure, but it's taken a real beating," she replied. "I'm reading multiple hull breaches and no power output. Wait a sec. I'm picking up life signs. Someone's still alive over there." Jake leaned back in his chair and scratched his stubble. They were still being pursued by an entire alien armada. The last thing they needed was to play paramedic, but leaving them stranded went against everything he stood for. "Hail them!" Sanchez gave him a sharp nod. "Aye, Captain," opening a channel. The view screen flickered, then resolved into an image of a dimly lit bridge. The alien that appeared had blue skin and 4 arms. Jake noted a trickle of green blood running down its face. "Unknown vessel, I am Captain Zalar of the Ethan ship Nexus. Our ship is crippled. We require immediate assistance." The alien's voice was strained. Jake straightened his uniform. "This is Captain Jake Ryder of the human starship Odyssey. What happened to your ship?" "We were attempting to escape Zorgax space when we were ambushed. We managed to lose them in an asteroid field, but not before taking heavy damage. Our engines are offline and life support is failing. Please, we need your help." Zalar's desperation was evident. Jake's first instinct was to refuse. They were being chased by the same aliens that had attacked the Ethans. Getting involved was an unnecessary risk, but then he considered the opportunity before him. The Ethans had direct experience with the Zorgax. They could provide valuable intel that might give humanity a fighting chance. "We'll help you," Jake said, "but in return I need information on the Zorgax." Zalar's relief was visible. "Of course, anything you need." "Stand by for docking." Jake cut the channel and turned to Sanchez. "Assemble a repair team and have them meet me in the shuttle bay, and tell Riggs to keep a close eye on sensors. I don't want any surprises." The Odyssey's shuttle touched down inside the Nexus's cavernous landing bay. The human repair crew disembarked, hauling crates of tools and spare parts. They were met by a group of Ethans, led by Zalar himself. "Thank you for coming," Zalar said, shaking Jake's hand with 2 of his own. "We owe you our lives. Thank us when we're no longer dead in space. Speaking of which, let's get you fixed up." The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. Human engineers worked side by side with their Ethan counterparts, patching hull breaches and restoring power to critical systems. As he worked on the ship's engines, Jake took the opportunity to grill Zalar on the Zorgax. What he learned chilled him to the bone. "They're unlike anything we've encountered," Zalar said. "Their ships are armed with energy weapons that can slice through shields like they're not even there. And their armor is nearly impenetrable. We've seen them take direct hits from antimatter torpedoes and keep coming." Jake swallowed hard. "Do they have any weaknesses?" Zalar considers for a moment. Their ships are fast but can't turn worth a damn. They've sacrificed maneuverability for raw power. If you're quick on your feet, you can outfly them. It wasn't much, but Jake would take any edge he could get. They were going to need it. Thank you, Zala. I know it's not easy to talk about. Zala shook his head. No, it's not. But after everything your people have done for us, it's the least I can do. I just hope it's enough. Jake was about to reply when an alarm blared through the ship. His comm crackled to life. Captain, you need to get back here now. It was Riggs, and he sounded panicked. A Zorgax warship just dropped out of FTL. They'll be on top of us in minutes. Jake cursed under his breath. They were out of time. He turned to Zayla, his mind racing. Should they stay and fight? The Odyssey was outgunned, but with the Zorgax's slower turning speed, Jake might be able to outmaneuver them. But if they took a hit to the FTL drive, it was game over. Or should he cut his losses and run, leave the Ethans to their fate, and continue the race back to Earth? It was the safe option, but it would mean condemning Zala and his crew to certain death or capture. And after everything they'd learned, Jake wasn't sure he could live with that. He had seconds to decide. The fate of two crews hung in the balance. Jake's hand hovered over the comm, ready to give the order that would seal their fate. Jake's hand slammed down on the console. "Riggs, get us out of here now!" The Odyssey's engines roared to life, and the ship shot forward, quickly accelerating to FTL speeds. The stars stretched into lines as they left the Zorgax warship in their wake. But the victory was short-lived. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as the ship shuddered violently. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled the air. "Report," Jake barked, gripping the armrest of his chair. Sanchez's fingers flew across her station. "The FTL drive is overloading. We pushed it too hard, too fast. It's tearing itself apart." Jake gritted his teeth. They couldn't afford to drop out of FTL, not with the Zorgax hot on their heels. But if they didn't, the drive would explode and take the ship with it. "Riggs, find us somewhere to hide. Sanchez, do what you can to hold the drive together. We just need a little more time." The crew worked frantically as the ship shook around them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Riggs called out, "I've got something. Uncharted system, one habitable planet. It's our best shot." Jake nodded. "Take us in." The Odyssey dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the system. Immediately the shaking stopped as the drive powered down, but the damage was done. Smoke poured from the engine room, and the ship listed to one side. "Sanchez, what's our status?" Jake asked, dreading the answer. Sanchez shook her head. "It's bad, Captain. The drive is fried. We're not going anywhere until we can repair it. And with the damage we've taken, that could be weeks, maybe months." Jake slammed his fist against the wall. They didn't have that kind of time. Every second they spent stranded was another second the Zorgax had to find them. But as he stared out at the unknown planet, a glimmer of hope sparked in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they could find help down there. Riggs scanned the planet. Look for any signs of civilization, technology, anything that could help us. Riggs bent over his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not picking up much, Captain. Wait, there's a faint signal coming from the northern hemisphere. It's weak, but it's definitely artificial." Jake leaned forward. "Can you isolate it?" Riggs nodded. "It's a distress beacon, Ethan, in origin." Jake's heart raced. Ethan's here, it seemed impossible. But after everything they'd seen, he'd learned to expect the unexpected. He turned to his crew. "Prep the shuttle, we're going down there." The planet's surface was a harsh, unforgiving landscape of jagged rocks and swirling dust storms. Jake and a small team picked their way through the terrain, following the distress signal. As they crested a ridge, they saw it, a hidden base carved into the side of a mountain. Ethan's ships were scattered across the landing pad, some in various states of repair. Suddenly, a group of armed Ethans emerged from the base, weapons raised. Jake and his team raised their hands in surrender. "We mean you no harm," Jake called out. "We're here to help." The Ethans exchanged glances, then lowered their weapons. One of them, a tall male with a scar across his face, stepped forward. "I am Zalar, leader of this resistance cell. How did you find us?" Jake gestured to the Ethan ships. "We picked up your distress signal. We're on the run from the Zorgax, same as you. We thought maybe we could help each other." Zalar's eyes narrowed. "And why should we trust you? For all we know, you could be Zorgax spies." Jake met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because we're both fighting for the same thing. Freedom from the Zorgax, and because we have something you need." He nodded to Sanchez, who stepped forward and held out a data chip. "This contains the schematics for our FTL drive. With this, you can break free from Zorgax oppression once and for all." Zalar took the chip, turning it over in his hands. "And what do you want in return?" Jake smiled. "Your help. Your knowledge of Zorgax weaknesses. Together we can take the fight to them." Zalar considered for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, come inside. We have much to discuss." As Jake and his team followed Zalar into the base, a sense of hope blossomed in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance after all. But unbeknownst to them, a figure lurked in the shadows, watching their every move. A spy loyal to the Zorgax, who had just transmitted the location of the base to the waiting fleet. The attack would come soon, and when it did, the fate of both the humans and the Ethans would hang in the balance. The base shook as Zorgax plasma artillery pounded the surface. Red lights flashed, and warning sirens blared as Jake sprinted through the corridors. He burst into the command center, where Zalar was barking orders to his troops. "Status report," Jake yelled over the chaos. Zalar pointed to the holographic display. "Their first wave has breached the outer defenses. We're holding them back for now, but they just keep coming." Jake studied the tactical readout. The Zorgax had them outnumbered and outgunned. It was only a matter of time before they were overrun. Suddenly an explosion rocked the base, throwing them off their feet. Jake hauled himself up and checked the display. His heart sank. "They've taken out the shield generator. We're exposed." Zalar slammed his fist on the console. "We need to evacuate. Get your people to the Odyssey and go." Jake shook his head. "We're not leaving you behind. This is our fight, not yours. You have to warn your people." Jake was about to argue when Sanchez's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I think I've found something. The nebula, half a light year from here. It's laced with gravitational anomalies. If we could lure the Zorgax in there—" Jake's mind raced. It was a crazy plan, but it might just work. He turned to Zalar. "What if we don't have to run? What if we make them chase us?" Zalar frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "We use the Odyssey as bait. Draw them away from the base and into the nebula. Then we hit them with everything we've got." Zalar considered, then nodded. "It's a gamble, but it's better than waiting for slaughter. I'll have my people modify your torpedoes, make them count." Jake clasped his shoulder. "We will. Now let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with us." The Odyssey shot out of the base, engines blazing. Jake watched the sensors as the Zorgax fleet turned to pursue, just as he'd hoped. "They're taking the bait. Rigs. Lay in a course for the nebula. Maximum velocity." The ship shuddered as the Zorgax opened fire, their energy beams sizzling past the hull. Jake gripped the armrests as Riggs wove through the barrage, each hit draining their shields a little more. "Just a little further," Jake muttered. Finally, the swirling clouds of the nebula loomed ahead. Jake leaned forward. "Sanchez, prime the torpedoes. Riggs on my mark. Execute evasive pattern delta." The crew acknowledged as the Zorgax closed in, their hulking warships filling the view screen. Jake watched the range indicator tick down, his finger hovering over the firing control. "Mark!" The Odyssey jinked hard to starboard as Sanchez launched a full spread of torpedoes. The glowing orbs shot into the nebula, disappearing into the multicolored haze. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the nebula erupted in a blinding flash. Gravitational shockwaves rippled outwards, catching the Zorgax fleet in their destructive embrace. The alien ships twisted and buckled, their hulls crushed by the immense forces. One by one they imploded, vanishing into the ruptured fabric of space-time. Jake watched in awe as the last Zorgax dreadnought was swallowed by the maelstrom. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. But even as the crew celebrated, Jake knew this was only the beginning. The Zorgax Emperor would not take this defeat lightly. He would hunt them to the ends of the universe to claim the secret of FTL. But for now, they had bought themselves some time. Time to heal, to regroup, to plan. And when the Zorgax came again, they would be ready. Jake turned to his crew, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "Patch me through to Zayla. We have a future to fight for." The Odyssey floated in the void, her hull scarred and battered from the fierce battle with the Zorgax fleet. Inside, the crew scrambled to repair the damage, knowing every second counted. They were the only ones who could warn Earth of the coming storm. Jake wiped the sweat from his brow as he worked on the ship's engines. Sparks flew as he welded a ruptured power conduit, the acrid smell of burnt metal filling his nostrils. It was grueling work, but he pushed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. Xylar entered the engine room, his forearms laden with tools and spare parts. "I brought the components you requested," he said, setting them down beside Jake. "How are the repairs progressing?" Jake sat back on his haunches and surveyed his handiwork. "Slowly but surely. We took a hell of a beating back there." Xylar nodded, his expression grim. "The Zorgax do not take defeat lightly. They will come for us again." "I know," Jake said, standing up and stretching his aching muscles. "That's why we need to get back to Earth as soon as possible. We have to warn them." Xylar placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "I will come with you. My people have fought the Zorgax for generations. I can share our knowledge of their tactics and technology with your leaders." Jake smiled, grateful for the Ethan's support. "Thank you, Xylar. We're going to need all the help we can get." As they made their way to the bridge, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his gut. The Zorgax Emperor was not one to take defeat lying down. Even now he was probably plotting his revenge, marshalling his forces for a devastating assault on humanity. Light years away on Earth, Commander Liam Beckett stood before a holographic display of the solar system, his brow furrowed in concentration. Red dots representing Zorgax ships blinked ominously at the edge of the system, a constant reminder of the threat they faced. "Commander Beckett, the latest intelligence reports have come in," a young officer said, handing him a datapad. "The Zorgax advance force has begun probing our outer defenses." Liam scanned the report, his mouth set in a grim line. The Zorgax were testing their strength, looking for weaknesses to exploit. It was only a matter of time before they launched a full-scale invasion. He turned to face the assembled members of the UNSC, the weight of his responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "We need to bolster our defenses," he said, his voice firm. "The Odyssey will be returning soon with vital intelligence on the Zorgax. We must be ready to act on that information." A murmur of dissent rippled through the room. Some argued for a preemptive strike, wanting to take the fight to the Zorgax before they could attack. Others counseled caution, fearful of provoking an even greater response. Liam held up his hands for silence. "I understand your concerns, but we cannot afford to be divided. The Zorgax threaten our very existence. We must stand united in the face of this threat." As the debate raged on, Liam felt torn between his loyalty to his friend Jake and his duty to protect Earth. He knew that the intelligence Jake brought back could be the key to their survival, but he also knew that time was running out. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the command center. Liam spun to face the holographic display, his heart pounding in his chest. A swarm of red dots surged towards Earth, their numbers far greater than anything they had seen before. "It's the Zorgax," someone shouted. "They're attacking." Liam leaped into action, barking orders to his subordinates. "Scramble all fighters. Activate planetary defenses. We need to hold them off until the Odyssey arrives." As the UNSC forces mobilized to meet the Zorgax onslaught, Liam could only hope that Jake and his crew would make it back in time. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and every second counted. The Odyssey shuddered as it dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the solar system. Jake gripped the armrests of his chair as he stared at the view screen in horror. Earth hung before them, shrouded in the flames of war. Zorgak ships swarmed around the planet like angry hornets, their weapons firing relentlessly at the beleaguered defenders. "We're too late," Riggs whispered, his face ashen. Jake shook his head, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "No, we're not. We can still make a difference. Sanchez, charge the weapons. Riggs, lay in a course for Earth. We're going in." As the Odyssey surged forward, Jake knew that the battle ahead would be the fight of their lives. But he also knew that he had the best crew in the galaxy at his side and a powerful ally in Zayla. Together, they would stand against the Zorgaks and fight for the future of humanity, no matter the cost. The ship shook as a Zorgak's energy beam grazed their shields. Jake gritted his teeth as he watched the shield strength indicator drop precipitously. They couldn't take many more hits like that. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Keep those fighters off our back." Riggs sent the Odyssey into a dizzying spiral, the inertial dampeners straining to compensate. The Zorgak's ships flashed past the view screen, their angular hulls glinting in the light of Earth's sun. In the gunner's seat, Sanchez let loose a barrage of fire, her face set in grim concentration. The ship's advanced weaponry, augmented with Ethan technology, tore through the Zorgak's shields like paper. One by one, the enemy fighters exploded into brilliant fireballs, but there were always more to take their place. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission from the surface," Riggs said, his fingers flying over the comm controls. "It's Commander Beckett." Jake nodded. "Put him through." Liam's face appeared on the view screen, his features taut with stress. Behind him, the UNSC command center was a hive of activity, officers rushing back and forth as they coordinated the planetary defense. "Jake, thank God you made it," Liam said. "We're holding them off for now, but we can't keep this up forever. Please tell me you have something we can use against them." Jake glanced at Zayla, who stepped forward. "Commander Beckett, I am Zayla of the Ethan Resistance. My people have fought the Zorgaks for generations, and we have developed weapons and tactics that can help turn the tide of this battle." Liam's eyes widened. "That's great news. Send us everything you've got. We'll start integrating it into our defenses immediately." As Zayla worked to transmit the data, Jake turned his attention back to the battle raging outside. The Odyssey weaved through the Zorgaks formation, her guns blazing. But for every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "We need to take out their command ship," Jake said, scanning the battlefield. "If we can disrupt their coordination, it might give us a chance." "There," Riggs said, pointing to a massive dreadnought at the heart of the Zorgak's fleet. "That's got to be it." Jake nodded. "Sanchez, I need a targeting solution on that dreadnought. Riggs, get ready to punch a hole through their defenses." The crew worked frantically as the Odyssey charged forward, her engines straining at the limits of their endurance. Zorgak ships swarmed around them, their weapons pounding the human ship's shields. But Jake refused to yield. With a final burst of speed, the Odyssey broke through the Zorgak's lines, her weapons locked onto the command ship. "Fire!" Jake roared. A salvo of quantum torpedoes leaped from the Odyssey's launch tubes, followed by a barrage of Ethan disruptor beams. The combined attack slammed into the Zorgak's dreadnought, ripping through its shields and tearing great gashes in its hull. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the Zorgak's command ship exploded into 1,000,000 pieces. A cheer went up from the Odyssey's crew as they watched the Zorgak's fleet descend into chaos. Without their leadership, the enemy ships milled about in confusion, easy prey for the reinvigorated human defenders. But even as they savored their victory, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. The Zorgak's Emperor would not rest until he had crushed humanity and claimed the secret of FTL travel for himself. There would be more battles to come, more sacrifices to be made, but for now they had bought themselves some time. Time to regroup, to plan, to prepare for the long struggle ahead. And with Zayla and the Ethans at their side, Jake knew that humanity would not face that struggle alone. Together, they would stand against the darkness and fight for a future free from the tyranny of the Zorgax. As the Odyssey soared through the debris field of the shattered Zorgax fleet, Jake allowed himself a moment of hope. They had won the day, but the war was far from over. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that he and his crew would face them head-on, united in their determination to protect their home and their people. The ship shuddered again, but this time it was not from enemy fire. It was the tremor of a crew, a ship, a species that had looked into the face of annihilation and refused to blink. It was the quiver of a people ready to fight, to sacrifice, to do whatever it took to safeguard their way of life. Jake leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the view screen and the blue-green orb of Earth below. They had come so far, endured so much, but he knew that their greatest trials still lay ahead. But they would face those trials together, as a crew, as a people, as a force for the light in a galaxy threatened by darkness. And with the strength of their resolve, the power of their unity, and the unbreakable bonds of their fellowship, Jake knew that they would emerge victorious no matter the odds. For they were human, and they would not go gently into the night. They would rage against the dying of the light, and in doing so they would illuminate the stars themselves with the fire of their determination. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. And Jake Ryder and the crew of the Odyssey would be there to lead the charge, to stand tall in the face of the oncoming storm, and to show the Zorgax and the galaxy the true strength of the human spirit. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And for every comment that says, "I liked the story," I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.